Welcome to the Legal Innovation Forum podcast series, Leading at the Intersection of Business, Innovation and Law. I'm Lucy Saddleton, Managing Editor at the Legal Innovation Forum. Brought to you in association with Harvey, this episode features a panel discussion at the Legal Innovation Forum Toronto 2026 on the leadership skills and governance structures required to lead amid global disruption. This discussion brings together legal department and law firm leaders to discuss how they are building innovation-focused teams and balancing the opportunities of AI with responsible governance and long-term strategic leadership.
Very briefly, my name is Joe Miranda. I'm an innovation partner at Harvey. Prior to this role, I practiced tax law for a few minutes and then moved into the legal tech space and then did the innovation function at a couple large law firms. But today I'll be asking the questions, so you won't hear from me much more than that. And I'd like to begin by asking our panelists to actually introduce themselves, the organizations that they work within, and give us a snapshot at where you are in your transformation journeys today. So maybe we'll go down this way if that works.
Okay, start with me.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be with you. And Andrew, thank you for the opportunity to be on the panel. I'm Andrea Wood, Chief Legal and Governance Officer of Telus. And I guess I should start by explaining a little bit about Telus. You probably all know us as a telecom company. In addition, we operate a health technology business that operates worldwide. As well, we're in the ag tech business, again, a worldwide business. And then finally, and perhaps most relevantly for this session, we're in the AI business through our Telus digital subsidiary. We sell a product called Fuel iX that basically sits on top of all of the large language models and directs inquiries to the appropriate LLM for any given inquiry. So we do that. In addition, we customize that, and we do data annotation that's used to annotate the data that's used to train AI. We like to think we're leaders in the area of responsible AI. And then finally, we are users of AI. And you asked where we are in the journey. I would say my team, and I'll talk a little bit more about why this is the case, but my team is was probably initially one of the most advanced teams in adopting AI. And I think it continues to be right up there. I think everybody's caught up to us on the adoption side. But what we have yet to do is process redevelopment and process re-engineering. And so, and I'm not aware of, and maybe I'll hear from you that you're different, but I'm not aware of too many companies in Canada yet having really re-engineered their legal processes and the other processes that they build into to take into account AI. So brief overview, my team spans the globe, about 260 people, plus or minus. Our data and privacy officer feeds into me, and she owns responsible AI. And I'm corporate secretary to the board, and so I think it's important to say that we also have spent a lot of time thinking about governance of AI. So very broad topic for us because it touches us in many different ways. And I guess as today unfolds, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But maybe over to you, Sandra.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. And I am actually relieved to hear you say you're not at the point of systemic deployment for AI. Pleasure to be with you all here today. And thanks again to Andrew and the team for the invite back to the Legal Innovation Forum, which is one I've been following along with and participating in for some years, and always a great collaborative experience on topics just like these. So I'm Sandra Perri. I'm General Counsel for Corporate Legal at Sun Life, which is a global financial institution. Many of you would know it for insurance. We're actually slightly bigger in asset management globally now than insurance on some metrics. And have been living and supporting businesses that are trying to be digital first for quite some time now. even in a heavily regulated FI environment like ours. My accountability spans legal support for all of our enterprise work across the organization, our corporate functions, and the corporate secretarial functions supporting the board. So that spans M&A, securities and disclosure, global HR, technology, IP, sustainability, marketing and communications, and most relevant maybe for this group, legal operations. The team is sitting back there today. In terms of where we are in sort of our transformation journey, very similar theme, well, in part because Andrea is in a different environment than we are, but adoption is going well. Maybe I'll feel differently once I've heard from everyone, but I feel like we are feeling reasonably good on adoption and rollout. We have a series of internal and external tools. We've got lots of coders and engineers internally at Sun Life across the organization in our different geographies. So one dimension I'll bring to this is, the build versus buy scenario that we're often talking through. But we are pretty good on adoption for AI. We've also, done before this boom, a lot of process work to get self-serve tools in place, playbooks in place. We've got a more consolidated tech stack when you're talking about delivery of legal services. Law firm management is tighter. We've got e-billing and all of those things that generate lots of data. And so we're getting better as we go on data capabilities as well. We are, though, at the point, and I feel less confident about that overall process re-engineering work that does need to happen, certainly across legal services. So that more systemic deployment piece is one that I'll be, listening keenly to everyone on the panel and in the room today to get some ideas on. But yeah, we're earlier days on that.
So I'm Caroline Zayid. I feel I might be a little bit the imposter on the panel. I just recently completed my term as managing partner for Toronto McCarthy. So my contact, I guess, and responsibility for innovation and technology and AI is as a member of our leadership team. I'm personally probably behind the curve, but I think I can say that our firm is well positioned. I'll put it in a few different contexts. First of all, we had been working with AI, particularly in our e-discovery and MT3 business for many years, using it and very much up to speed on what was happening. So I think that put us in a very good position when this wave burst onto the scene to realize the power of the tools, to be ready, curious, open-minded about using them, and therefore very, very willing to look for what tools will be the most useful, both to us in the operation of our firm, but more particularly in our work for clients, and to find those tools and figure out how to get lawyers using them, how to work with clients to use them. So I think we're well down that path. Our focus is very much that this is not a pilot model, small team is using particular things, but really a firm-wide, how do we use this technology to do better what we've always been doing, but perhaps in very different ways, as Sandra and Andrea have mentioned. On the other hand, I would say lawyers are conservative people. Ours are no different. We're still moving up the curve in terms of making sure that everybody is using the tools and using the right tools. So that is something I think we'll be talking about today. So I would say we're still kind of in a discovery phase, not in the sense that we're figuring out if we want to use it, but as new tools get adopted, figuring out what works, individual lawyers learning how to use them, and then us as an organization figuring out what is bringing most value, how to bring most value, and to continue learning and moving further.
Good morning. My name is Natalie Munroe. I'm the chief of Osler Works Transactional and Legal Operations at Osler. Osler Works Transactional is our ALSP for corporate and commercial transactions. Interestingly, it's turning 10 this year, which is somewhat hard to believe. I am responsible for our AI strategy as well as legal operations at the firm. I'd say we have the infrastructure, the governance, the strategy, and we are very much similar to others in that position where we have incredible ad hoc and individual use, and we now need to shift to scalable and institutional use. At most law firms, including our own, there's obviously not just an adoption work stream, there are work streams across the various aspects of the firm, be it from a practice perspective or operational perspective, that are well underway, but we still, like many, have a long way to go.
That's great, thank you all. And I think one theme I heard across those answers is that that first phase of bringing in the technology is kind of the easy part, and then sort of fully transforming involves sort of thinking about human behavior and how you can influence that in the right ways within your organizations to bring people along in your transformation. So the first kind of subtopic is skills, and I'd love to hear from the panel, and not everybody needs to answer. Whoever wants to go first, go for it. What are some of the skills that you've had to develop or really lean in on over the last couple of years to drive transformation effectively within your organizations?
Leadership skills.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, not technical skills.
No, correct, yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to kick off. I hope I don't insult the entire room by saying that I don't think lawyers are necessarily trained to be good leaders, and so I think when new people become new leaders on my team, I talk to them about the difference between leading and coaching versus supervising. I think in the legal context, we tend to think about leading as supervising. So, very important distinction for me has always been, as a leader, what is demanded of you is different than maybe it was at a law firm as a supervisor of lawyers or as a mentor to other more junior lawyers. As a leader, I think you're expected to demonstrate thought leadership, you're expected to inspire, and you're expected to make people very comfortable with a growth mindset. And so we've been talking about, I know it's a little bit douchey, but for years we've been talking about being the legal department of the future. And 2 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, we brought in Richard Susskind to talk to us about what that meant. 2 years ago, we gathered the entire team. We brought in data engineers and data scientists, and we broke the team into groups, and we made them build co-pilots. And that was the beginning, I would say, of our very wide adoption of AI, because it gave them the tools that they needed to start to build co-pilots of their own. And so another leadership attribute, I had to trust that if I, told them what the guardrails were and what the limits of what they ought to do and could do were, I could trust them to play with the technology. And that, for lawyers, trust doesn't come easily. But I would say that set us off on a period of intense experimentation to the point that we now have people building co-pilots all over my team, and we're now thinking about how to rein them in. Are we having too many people doing too many things that are the same, and so wasting their time? Should we now be? And so we're bringing them tight again for a little bit. We'll go loose again after that, but we're now cataloging everything that we've got. People have built across the team. I actually have a guy on my team who has built his own LLM, and he coded it using, I forget which large language model, but I hate to say it, but we are now working to build it so that it may be competitive with Harvey. Sorry,
That's honest.
we may be
That's
coming for you.
Yeah.
But it's an extraordinary tool that we've been leveraging on my team. So it's, and not driven from me, not top down, just I gave the team the tools that they needed to experiment and to follow their own journeys into the technology. So, maybe there are a few attributes there, but yeah. I think it's really important to say it doesn't all have to come from us.
Yeah, that's great.
I'd pick up on a lot of the similar themes, right? We've been talking about the importance of leading through ambiguity for quite a while now, even prior to this this conversation around digital transformation. with all of the change in the external environment, be it geopolitical, economic, our businesses are impacted and having to react to things every day. And we have really been trying to double down on that adaptability quotient, right? So that comfort in ambiguity, actually thriving in an environment that is constantly changing, and showing and creating the space. That's a really great example Andrea raised, where you're actually creating the space to show that it's okay to try things out, make mistakes. So we're a lot more focused on whether it's supporting rollouts, across the organization, things that are going on, or how we are experimenting ourselves, really trying to model and demonstrate that it is okay to trial and error. It's okay to fail fast, which is, a motto we've had, again, across the broader organization. Lawyers are slower to adopt that for themselves because we don't like to fail things. We like to make sure that what we're going to do is going to be successful, right? So I think there's that piece of it, and the learning mindset is absolutely a component of the AQ, and you've got to do that in a visible way. So that is, showing up to the working group session of the pilot, asking your own questions, showing how you're using the technology. What did you do this week or this month that made a real impact? My work looks a lot different than the people on the teams that roll into me, and so people do wonder, how are the leaders using it? Is this a top-down exercise? So it's that visible learning in an environment where we're all a little bit uncomfortable, and showing that's perfectly okay, and really rewarding people who are kind of taking those risks and living that thriving in ambiguity mantra we've had.
The only thing I might add, and it's sort of a counterpoint to the ambiguity, is I think one of the other things that you need to bring to the table is clarity, and that in the sense of clarity about purpose, clarity about values, so that, and again, particularly for lawyers, I think that when they understand how this connects and how what you might do connects to our fundamental objectives, our fundamental values as a profession, it's a lot easier for people to feel comfortable and feel like this is going to help with what our profession has been doing since time immemorial, even though in a different way. But having that clarity with everything that you present and every change that comes along, I think helps people get comfortable.
Yeah, it is a good point. The way I would translate that when we're talking about our organization is aligning to purpose, and we want to do right by clients at the end of the day, and so just making sure people see that connection.
It can sometimes be really hard. I'm just going to tee off of what you said about clarity. Given all that's happening, many of us are in the eye of the storm, and it can be really hard to figure out which way to turn. And so one of the things that I often think about, and I don't think it's a formal type of capability, but I often talk to my team about finding the quiet, finding those moments where you can block out the noise, pull the information that you need together, synthesize it, and then make deliberate and purposeful decisions instead of just reacting to what's happening in the market. And I think by doing so myself, I set the tone for my team where they feel like they can do that. They have the permission to say, I'm just going to think about this for a bit and come back to you. And I think that that's really helpful in this type of environment where things are moving so quickly.
That's really great. A lot of good insights. And yeah, and I guess your point of finding the quiet, if you're doing that yourself, you're then modeling that, and then people feel that you've been thoughtful about the direction you're taking things in from a transformation perspective. Really like the idea of lifelong learning. And maybe to your question on technical or leadership, maybe the leadership skill is having a technical curiosity and displaying that for folks as well. Trying to build your own Harvey, I don't know if that's a great idea, so but everything else is really good. Okay, so the next question I had was on sort of dealing with fatigue. So you put all this thought into transformation, you have your goals, but you need to motivate the base. It felt like in the first couple of years of generative AI hitting the scene, people were sort of coming to their leaders, coming to their innovation teams, and saying, I want to try out all the things. You do all the pilots, you give them all the tools, and now it kind of feels like people are a bit tired, maybe want to have the same user experience next week as they did this week. So what are you folks doing in your organizations to keep people motivated to rethink the way that they do their work day to day, in addition to the technology they're using, but maybe constantly thinking about new ways, how they could use it to change their workflows?
Okay. Well, I guess I'm not sure I agree with the premise that fatigue has set in for us, because we see ourselves as being at the very beginning of this, and we're all excited by it. But it's not the only thing we talk about.
Right.
And when we talk about innovation, it's not all about AI. I was telling Andrew earlier, now I'm being pushed to think about quantum and the implications of quantum for our business and the technology that we use, and I haven't got my head around it yet, but there's always the next thing. We're not done with AI. As I said at the beginning, we have yet to really rethink across the enterprise how we're going to approach processes, some of which are legal processes, but because legal processes inform the other business functions, and they're embedded within the other business functions and tools, that becomes more of a cross-enterprise thing. So I'm not sure I agree with the premise of the question.
Yeah, we're fairly still enthused about this because there's lots of opportunity. I mean, I'd say a couple of things. One is there will be ebbs and flows, and sure, when we finish a pilot, we roll out a tool, and you can, if you don't check on that thing and water it and foster it, you're not going to have the sustained adoption and the continued evolution of it that's going to give you those gains that you're hoping to see in the return on your investment. So, some of the things are just back to basics, right? We were very, very vocal about spotlighting who was using it and for what and what cool thing they came up with earlier days. I have found myself prompting that we return to that. Like, what happened to those drop-in sessions? Let's get those back on every week. Let me make a point of going to more of those myself as I used to. Right, that this is something we still care a lot about. So showing that. Another one that may be more controversial if you just think about it on its face is but thinking about how you incorporate this into performance evaluation. And I don't mean from a metric standpoint, like use it or let's count the number of times you went into. It's not that. It's giving people actually an opportunity to showcase where they chose to use it for value, to bring value to the organization. And conversely, where maybe they chose not to use it and where and how they were intentional about that, where they showed that their judgment was still shining through. People have tended to appreciate those kinds of opportunities and to understand how it plays into the way in which they're being evaluated, which it does play a role. And lawyers need, in my experience, to be shown. I'm one of them, right? I need to see how that thing is going to make my life easier, how I'm going to get rid of that most dreaded task. Hopefully we'll get to the point where people see it as an opportunity to bolster how they're showing up, make themselves look better and show up better and improve the quality of what they're delivering. But we use our town hall forums, almost all of them have a component of this now. I've recently returned from a trip to Asia. We spent some time with our legal teams in Hong Kong and in India. And even there, other side of the world, different tools, different challenges, different regulatory environment. But we spend a portion of our time talking about innovation in general, but AI specifically has been really top of mind, and really seeing how people, thrive, getting to be the ones who become teachers and explain, what it is they're doing. So we really try and lean into all of those things. And if we did get to a point where I felt we were in a really big lull, we'd probably have to pivot again. So some of it is shining the light. And then, if I may, this gets more into some of the themes you might want to get to on data. But how do we use AI or other process innovation tactics that we have and strategies that we have to solve real problems that help us deliver what we need to for our businesses? And so one of the things that's earlier days that we are building a bot around doing is consolidating our commercial contracting data in corporate legal, which is comprised, it's high volume, it's a lot of technology contracting that's in that bucket, and really trying to get deeper insights led by the people who are supporting that work every day, closest to it, best positioned to understand where our opportunities are and what is the work that needs to get done and by whom, and supported by what, including technology. So getting the insights around volume, exposure, the clauses and issues we spend most time negotiating, where we might think we're spending a lot of time negotiating and maybe are, but they're not translating into any real risk. Legally, no disputes, no loss. And so trying to get a handle on that and feed it into intake so that we are actually better triaging and understanding what might be higher touch and understanding conversely what might be no touch, where we're going to fall back on playbooks and other things that we've developed to support our business. So there's a couple of things, problem solving and showcasing is two themes.
Could I just jump in to say one thing about fatigue? For me, a bigger worry than fatigue and something that may slow us down a little bit is cost. And we haven't talked about that yet. Right now, there are no implications for me and my team from a budget perspective in playing with the tools. And so we're going wild. We are playing. And we're doing a lot of experimentation. It's been great. But at some point, the cost of, we're going to need to assess the cost of the tools that we're playing with relative to the cost of the humans that they might replace at some point. And we are not there yet. I have no idea how much it's costing us because it's all being borne by our chief technology officer. But I expect that, like, you would be shocked if I listed for you all of the products that we're either using or playing with and about to use. Probably they're not all cost effective. So we're not there yet. I think that's going to be the thing that slows down our adoption versus fatigue.
That's a good point. I'd be curious to hear on the law firm side because, there's you get to build your teams, like your specialty teams, but on the law firm side, you've got a bigger base. So are you seeing that in pockets and how are you dealing with that?
I mean, two quick things. I think, for lawyers, it's got to be useful. They've got to very quickly be able to see the use and that it's easy to use. I think these tools do give that, but you have to start. So I think that's the main part of it. And I think once people see that for themselves, once you've shown me, then they'll do it. Yeah. The second thing I think is the drive by clients. So it seems like we've gone so quickly from clients telling us, I want it in our, agreements that you will not use AI unless you come and specifically check with me on the day, the minute you use it, et cetera, to you must use it and you must show me how you've used it and you must show me how that's done the work better. So I think that obviously inevitably drives lawyer behavior because they're starting to understand that that's an expectation for good legal practice and good legal service to clients.
I mean, I think when it comes to fatigue, lawyers have never really been through this before. And so there's a lot coming at them, be it in the newspaper and all of the articles that are circulated in blogs and events that happen. And then, of course, most firms like ourselves are throwing a lot of tools at our lawyers. And I think there's some very practical things you can do to help sort of combat or offset the fatigue. You can start small and grow. You can decide not to release all the features on day one. You can release some features and then continually release features thereafter. I think one of the things that we emphasize at the firm is that this is very much a team effort. No one individual is going to move the dial at the firm. They may do something fantastic, but to move the whole firm, it's a team effort. And so, as Andrea said, really thinking about this as an opportunity for the firm, thinking about it as a team effort, everybody needs to contribute, I think really helps create a sense of that you're building it together, not so much that you're overwhelmed by what's happening in the market.
That's great. My next question, I think maybe we'll hear different challenges, but the challenge I'm thinking about is dealing with sort of the opposite persona, those people who want an army of agents, and how you deal with that when you have sort of a base that you want to give the consistent experience over time to ease them into that transformation. So maybe like on the law firm side, my experience was I'd always get an email saying, hey, my friend's the co-founder of this company, can we get their product? And you already have a tool that does that. Or maybe there genuinely is something super interesting happening like OpenClaw and you're expected to respond today, but for governance reasons, otherwise change management, you can't. So how do you deal with that at the law firms?
I mean, it is difficult. Everybody's brother's cousin has built a tool and everybody wants you to see it. There's a book by Michael Lewis. It's called The New Thing. And it's about Jim Clark, who was the founder of Silicon Graphics, Netscape, and a bunch of other companies. He was brilliant, phenomenally successful, but he was also restless. And so before he'd finish one thing, he was on to the next thing. And so one of the questions that I always ask myself is, do we actually need the new thing? And my team sort of asks themselves, do we actually need it? And we as a team are often playing around with everything so that we're well informed and can talk to folks about why we might not need that new thing because we already have this other new thing. We also have everything centralized, and so folks generally know, sort of come to our team, ask our team, and we will give them what they need. We also use data to our favor. So often I'll get a call where someone will say, so-and-so just released this, we absolutely need it as a firm. And I will pull up all the data on their use, because we have a way that we track all inputs, all outputs across the firm, across our tools. And I'll say, funny thing, you've used a tool 9 times in 6 months. So here's what we're gonna do. We're actually going to, I'll send someone down to their office. We're gonna sit down and we're gonna explore the use of the tools we already have, because more likely than not, you're just jumping to the new thing because it seems like something we absolutely must have, when we might have a tool that gets you to where you need to go.
That's great. Any other thoughts?
Maybe just from in-house perspective, although the themes translate pretty well, it is a quite reactive environment, or the inclination can be to be quite reactive with the way things are evolving and how quickly they're moving, whether it's the viral blog post, something big is happening, or the Citrini research with the hypothetical economic scenario that turns markets, right? People do tend to be frenzied. And so I like to say back to basics on, there can be something refreshing about showing deliberate proactiveness, right? And just back to basics on strategic planning, doing your upfront needs assessments, deciding with your pros and cons and with all your stakeholdering what you're going to have as your focus areas, because we don't have unlimited resources, although I love the sounds of being at Telus and being able to play with anything you want to. I mean, we have access to a lot, and I did mention we've got also people internally building a lot in the company, and so we do have access to a lot, but really just showing that we were thoughtful in the direction we were taking. That doesn't mean you don't pivot. It doesn't mean you don't add new things, but you do have to get the return from the investment and know whether you're working with something that is scalable. So we're, in my mind, not going to get to the broad scale reimagining of the way in which we can get work done if we're too distracted. So maybe it's your point, Natalie, about finding the quiet in the storm or something along that same theme. But again, just back to basics on strategic planning and kind of sticking with it long enough, to see it through.
Yeah, I guess we're a little bit different because we have a product that we've enabled for everybody. Our Fuel IX product is, sits atop the LLMs and gives us access to all of them. And so everybody on my team has Fuel. And so everybody's using it, playing with it. As I said, though, we're not yet at the process engineering stage. And so we haven't adopted tools that are being used for cross-enterprise functions. So the things we're doing are quite, it's remarkable what they can do, but we're, contract analysis, contract review. We do have repositories of contracts that we can draw on. All of that, very simple, self-contained with the legal department. But once we start doing cross-enterprise stuff, we're going to have to figure it out more broadly. And as I said, I think we're about to do that. So because we're contained within the department, we don't need everybody to do it. Like we are, I don't even think that way. I think if you're interested in it, play with it. If I were starting out my career today, there is no way I would not be playing with it, because I do think that it is going to be embedded in all of our functions and all of our processes going forward. But I don't think anybody's there yet. So, the people who play with it are having fun. Not everybody's playing with it. At some point, once we get to the enterprise-wide process stage, everybody's going to have to do it, I think. But we're not there yet. So we can be a little bit more playful about it, I think.
I had a question on data, but I think we've heard a few points already. I want to skip ahead to talking about the apprenticeship model. It feels like because of the change our profession is going through, the apprenticeship model needs to adjust as well. People are delegating to technology instead of people. Juniors are sort of losing the opportunity to do reps because they're delegating to the technology themselves. So how are you folks thinking about that, making sure that we're arming the next cohort with all the skills they need to be competent lawyers, but then ultimately good trusted advisors?
So Osler's hosted a dinner that I went to where Janice Stein spoke. And Janice Stein, for those of you who don't know her, is a senior intellectual, a public intellectual. She teaches at the Monk Center. And she was my poli-sci 101 prof way back when. Anyway, she talked about AI in a really interesting way. She said all of the other teachers are worried about students using AI to cheat. I want them to use AI to build their, to write their papers. And then I want them to be critical about what the AI did and to think about how they might have better leveraged it to build a better paper. And I make them go back and I make them iterate and iterate. And maybe that's the new model to your question. I thought that was super interesting, and I've been thinking about it a lot since. There must be some kind of counterpart to that we can do. So it's not so much the old apprenticeship model, but it's really more teach yourself with AI and develop the skills that you need to build. Maybe AI will be doing all the stuff that junior lawyers used to do, but maybe you just skip that phase. So I'm not so worried. Maybe I'm very utopic about things. I don't know.
I mean, it's definitely something that we're thinking about very, very hard, and we do think is one of the biggest challenges. And I think when you think about legal education, how we train lawyers, it's got multiple phases. So we've got law school, we've got articling, and we've got probably first 2 or 3 years in the firm, and then they're ready to go and work for you guys. But
that's the other unspoken piece here.
But we have been thinking about all the elements, and I think just I'll mention one thing that we've been doing with the law schools, particularly at Western at the moment, where we're working with them to develop a course which would hopefully prepare students both to use the tools, but also to understand the tools, to think critically about how to interact with the product and so on. So that's one piece of it. In the firms itself, I think, we know, and Jordan Furlong and others have talked about this, the human lawyer skills that we need. So you get a decent work product out of AI, which is your first draft, and then you want to move on from there. And I think we've all been talking about humans in the loop and how do we supervise and how do we review. I think that's very important. In some cases, we can use technology tools to help give that feedback, but also I think we see a key role for the lawyer themselves to do it, and also for the senior lawyers to know how to give feedback on that. So it's not just checking for mistakes in the footnotes, but it's also, have you thought about what the client actually wanted in this case? So even, you've been talking about databases of contracts and standard terms and so on, and obviously AI is tremendously helpful with that. But there's also, the one contract or the one legal dispute where, yes, it's not worth that much money, and yes, we've had this kind of a product before, but there's a particular sensitivity within the company or within the marketplace or whatever that you need the lawyer to understand, so that they can then critically look at the product that's been developed for them and ask the right questions, may relate to what the client really needs. So I think that, we were thinking about that, and I definitely think what Dr. Stein has said is very relevant to that process. And I think the other thing, though, is it does really put an emphasis on what are those human lawyer skills. Like, we all talk so easily about, well, it's judgment, it's collaboration, it's listening, and we know that, but we've never been all that good at teaching those things. We don't even necessarily recognize how we ourselves do them. So I think that is going to be a major, major task for legal leaders, is thinking about what is it that makes you a good lawyer? What is judgment? And how do we show and tell and discuss and talk to our young people about that, so that they're actually learning it and not just they'll pick it up by doing it? Because I think we've relied on that. It does work in an apprenticeship model, but in this kind of accelerated version, it's going to be much more difficult, and we're going to have to be much, much, much more intentional about how we inculcate those skills.
I think we're doing a lot of the same thinking. I think the one thing I would add, it's just a quick thing, is that when you really think about the apprenticeship model, a certain part of it is quite ad hoc and random. And I think, when you actually think about how things are changing today, what folks are doing today, we actually need to go back and think about what that apprenticeship model actually accomplishes, and whether it really is the right model for going forward, or whether we need to be more intentional about how we teach our lawyers to practice. My 11-year-old son was using a calculator and he was punching in numbers, and I asked him, do you actually know what you're doing? Do you actually know why, 4 + 5 is 9? And he, of course, rolled his eyes multiple times and said, Mom, what do you think my teacher does? She teaches. And I think, for me, that was a real moment where I thought, right, we actually need to just think about how we teach people to have the skills that they need to have in order to practice and provide, services to clients.
One thing that AI doesn't do well is sell. And in the end, you guys are selling your services. And so there will be a place for somebody to be the face, I think, of your firms. And so maybe it's also teaching salesmanship.
Yeah, I am more encouraged to hear that the law firms are thinking so seriously about this, because whereas we will tend to hire in lawyers at a particular level of expertise coming in, and so we would tend not to have a first or second year associate level person come in-house, at least in our team. The traditional assumptions I've had about the level of training that X person will come to if they worked in a Toronto law firm, may need some testing, right? In this new generation where people are not sitting as much with a blank page. They are, not doing legal research from scratch and understanding what the mechanics are behind it. And I'm not even talking about the card you carry around the library to pull off the book. I'm talking about the Boolean searches and how you strung things together, to get at the source information. And then most critically, the experience level to judge the outputs from AI, to understand whether, something, even if it's not something you've looked at before in terms of a new issue, but the judgment and experience to draw on to know whether or not it's a valid output. So I worry, unlike Andrea, I actually do worry about that cohort the most, not for the fact that they'll get left behind. They are on the forefront of the technological movement. They are using the tools, and they're going to be way further ahead in a lot of ways because of that. Yeah. But this emphasis that I'm hearing across all three responses on feedback, critiquing, spending the time. It's now more not about sort of teaching somebody to do something from scratch. They'll come with their draft, but do not skip over that step, as with time pressures we're so prone to do, of really then sitting and evaluating and working with a person to understand and test that they know, whether something looks good or not and how it can be improved. So that iteration and critiquing process becomes all the more important. But overall optimistic, because this cohort is going to be way further ahead than any of us.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds exciting because there's an opportunity to take that deep thinking and what we want to do with the apprenticeship model going forward. And this technology can be very powerful in assisting with that, I think. Mm-hmm. And we're doing a lot of work on that as well, partnering with the law schools and whatnot, and you folks when you want to. But we are at time. Please join me in thanking this incredible panel. Amazing insights. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you for listening, and please stay tuned for the next episode.